Shabbat Shalom, friends, and welcome to the year 2022. We'll start writing that tomorrow. We'll see how long it takes us to remember. Earlier this week, I found Happy New Year bowls at Dollarama, so I picked up a few, and I'll save them for Rosh Hashanah to go along with the apple-shaped dish that I usually reserve for apple crisp. I like to be festive at home, so we also have decorative dish towels with apples and honey and the word Shana Tova on them that we use only 2 days a year. For Hanukkah, between all of the store-bought and the homemade decorations, I could open a store. For that holiday, we also have decorative dish towels for the kitchen. And if anyone uses them by accident for all 8 days, oof, you don't want to know what happens to them. And when it comes to Pesach, in addition to way too many dishes, we happen to have a lot of frogs, including, you might have guessed, look, don't touch hand towels that are full of embroidered frogs that I spent way too much money on for something just to look at. I would have brought them to show you today, but they're with the Pesach dishes. I wasn't going through them. In this week's Parsha, we encounter 7 of the 10 plagues that God, with the help of Moshe and Aaron, unleashed against Pharaoh and Egypt. The frog plague, which was found in chapter 7 and chapter 8, isn't a deadly plague, but it is a very annoying plague. It didn't really endanger the physical well-being of the Egyptians, but it probably impacted their mental well-being. Think back to the last time that you heard a frog. Maybe you were near a body of water, a cottage, a creek. Maybe you heard the frog, but you didn't see it. Maybe all you heard was, ribbit, ribbit. Or maybe you heard a few frogs and didn't see it. Ribbit, 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 ribbit. Now take that sound, which gets stuck in your ear, and multiply that experience and continue to multiply that experience. I would invite everyone in the room to say, ribbit, 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 but it's going to be annoying. The overwhelming cacophony of those frogs making noise, as well as the sight of frogs everywhere, was very unpleasant. When you hear a loud noise, you can't really get much else done. Think about working at home and the garbage truck is going nearby. Or if you're outdoors and there's an overhead airplane. Or even just a bunch of dogs barking. According to chapter 7, verse 28, the intention was that these frogs would be jumping everywhere in Egyptian homes, and not just in their terrariums or their aquariums. It was yuck. They would come into their bedrooms and mess up and jump on their beds. They would jump and ribbit in the servants' rooms too. That meant that the domestic engineers couldn't fulfill their tasks. Everything would be a mess. For a modern analogy, there would be delivery boxes everywhere because no one was really cooking anymore. And if that wasn't enough, the frogs would miraculously appear in ovens and in their kneading bowls. According to one midrash, when an Egyptian would prepare something to drink, the glass would become filled with frogs before a person could even get their lips to the brim of the cup, which would complicate so many aspects of life. from making the bed to baking bread or even fixing a simple cup of coffee. This frog plague would complicate, annoy, frustrate, temporarily lead to change. But the plague of frog, in the big picture, was not deadly. Few people died from the frog plague. And once the frog plague ended, the text continues with, Vativaesh haaretz. Oy, the smell. We don't like heinous stenches, but rarely do they kill us. So these Egyptians, they experienced the noise, the smell, and the sight of the frogs, and it was annoying, but on a mass scale, the frog plague was not deadly, and it didn't harm them too much. Other plagues impacted people's physical bodies, for sure, like the bloody water, the lice, the boils, and of course the final plague resulted in the death of countless Egyptians. If we take a step back, we can see that the totality of the plagues were an unexpected double whammy on both the physical and the mental well-being of Pharaoh and his people. Over the last 2 weeks, I have heard of about 5 people each day who have tested positive for Omicron, both in and out of the Beth Tzedec community. And these are mostly adults with 3 vaccines and kids with 1 or 2. These are people who either had no symptoms or they felt like they had a cold or the touch of the flu. Now, I need to make a disclaimer. While there are people who are still dying from COVID, I'm not talking about those people this Shabbat morning. I am not making a connection to the more than 5.4 million people around the globe who have died from COVID, and I'm not referring to the people months ago who were very sick. Not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about now. Now, most of the people that we hear about who are infected with COVID are inconvenienced. They can't go out. They're vaccinated, and so they have minimal effects. And they've inconvenienced others who they were in contact with, and they can't leave their homes either. And if they live with others, they need to wear masks at home, and many are so annoyed because they did all the right things since March 2020. And then, boom, December 2021 comes along with Omicron, and travel plans are canceled, and grandparents are back on the do not visit list. And one wonders, how did this happen? Clearly, I'm no doctor. I'm just a rabbi and a social worker. But based on the multiple conversations that I have had with people in the past 2 weeks who tested positive for the Omicron variant, their mental well-being and their emotional well-being has been impacted far more than their physical well-being. Those that have tested positive recently are sophisticated enough to know that asking those "why me" questions are useless. But still, it's hard. It's one more thing to add to the "it's not fair" list, and it's a biggie. It's one more ingredient to an already stressful and anxious reality that has been full of disruptors. Like so many of you, I have been searching for meaning and for this way of living that has been forced upon us to make sense. I've looked in Torah, I've looked to respected rabbis of the past and the present. I've looked back into all of this positive psychology, and I used all the skills that I have cultivated through my fellowship with the Institute of Jewish Spirituality. But few of those have come close to the impact of the book, Life is in the Transitions by Bruce Feiler. Life is in the Transitions by Bruce Feiler. In his language, we, and especially those who are listening, who have the Omicron variant inside of them right now, are currently experiencing a life quake, an onslaught of disruptors, of deviations from daily life, all at once. Feiler defines a life quake as a forceful burst of change in one's life that leads to an aspect of upheaval, transition, and renewal. When someone experiences a life quake, they are like the BCE-CE divide moments, in which a person's life story gets divided into a before and an after. How many times have you used the two words before COVID? The before and the after. All of the disruptors in our communal life quake are messy, and they're often miserable. In simple language, Feiler writes, they come at inconvenient times that usually make them even more inconvenient. How many events have you canceled, postponed, or rescheduled? Now, here at the shul, we have postponed 3 different baby namings this month, or I guess last month, and the calls keep coming in about the January and February B'nai Mitzvah. What are they supposed to do? Even I was supposed to leave on Tuesday for a family wedding in Israel. Guess what? I'm still going to be here. I can't do that. If we add all of what we have experienced, all of what we have lost, and what we have felt, it's a lot. Each disruptor on its own is real. And if we put them all together in the tohu vavohu, the chaos of a life quake, it's really, really tough for all of us. But Feiler, he adds one more piece of wisdom that could guide us and could have helped those Egyptians as they experienced plague after plague after plague, whether it was those darn frogs or their cattle dying. And this is the piece of wisdom. Life is not linear. He writes, the smartest minds today, including those studying computers, biology, math, and physics, have come to understand that the world no longer adheres to predictable, linear mandates. Instead, life is filled with chaos and complexity, periods of order and disorder, linearity and non-linearity. Non-linearity suggests that we should accept that there will be upheavals, uncertainty, and unexpected pain. But we're just not trained that way. That's why so many of us have been overwhelmed. We've all been trained to accept that life will unfold in a predictable way. And we get thrown off and confused and hurt, and we cry when it does not. As we start this secular new year, my blessing for all of us is that we remind ourselves with kindness that if the chapters of our life unfold too fast, or out of order, or on top of each other, or there's a chapter that we just don't want to read, that's okay. Because until now, we've been primed to expect that our lives will follow a predictable path. And we've really been thrown since March 2020 en masse because it hasn't. So in 2022, it's time to stop comparing ourselves to ideals that no longer exist. We might still get COVID. We might need to learn more letters in the Greek alphabet. Life cycle events might be postponed or minimized. People will die. And I have no idea what Purim is going to look like at Bet Tzedek this year. But this year, when we wake up each morning, before we turn on our phones to check out the news, let's gently remind ourselves that life is full of disruptors and it will unfold the way it is meant to unfold. Shabbat Shalom, and may 2022, please God, be a year of health and healing for all of us. Ribbit.